Really, all this is going to be is just very similar to what we discussed at the event, and quite brief sort of thing, maybe 10, 15 minutes at the most, just to touch on it. We like to sometimes get a one-on-one grab with some of our guests who've had at events before, just to talk about similar things and obviously about you as a woman in development and things like that. So I'll be asking similar things that I did at the event. But yes, so, just lining that up. Okay, so welcome, Susanne Legena. I'm right there, aren't I?
You are perfect.
I had my pronunciation written down. So yes,
that's perfect.
Yeah, so welcome, Susanne Legena, the CEO of Plan International Australia, and we'll get right into it. I really would like you to basically speak to your role in terms of as CEO of Plan International in Australia. And what that role means for you, what you've put into it, and what you're doing with it, and how you actually got there.
Okay, so I am the CEO of Plan International Australia. I'm coming into my 5th year of being the CEO. It's my first CEO role, so I feel like I'm probably only just starting to understand what it is I'm supposed to be doing 5 years in some ways. I think that I applied for the role because I wanted to have more impact, and I had already been working in Plan as a deputy, and I had started up the sort of advocacy and community engagement part of Plan International Australia's work. I had gone and had a baby, and when I came back into a deputy CEO role. And look, to be honest, when the person who left, he'd been in the organisation for 17 years, highly regarded humanitarian, wonderful person. I was encouraged by a lot of other women in my organisation to put my hand up, and I thought, well, I'll either get it and that'll be great, but if I don't get it, which I thought was more likely, I thought, well, at least I'll be the sort of floor. They'll have to be better than me, and then if they're better than me, I can learn, so that would be great. But you could have knocked me over with a feather when I found out that I actually got the job. And then perhaps I was not really prepared for all the things that it entails, which, a CEO role can be pretty daunting. All the problems end up with you.
Yeah.
And they end up with you because people have tried to work them out at other levels of the organisation, and they're at a loss, or because it needs your authority, or because you have to negotiate with the board, or you have to solve problems. And I came from mostly my background has been in movement building, community development at the front line, and in government and sort of policy change.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a deep development expert. I'm not an academic, but in a way, I think that's my strength. I think my strength as a CEO is to bring the right people together, convene the right people together in a safe, respectful way to explore the possibilities and to solve problems together and to create opportunities. And that's kind of what I see my job as, being a kind of a person who can reflect back to the group what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, kind of mine the wisdom of the group and reflect that in, how we summarise and make sense of it in the world. I think my job is to kind of connect people constantly to the mission and the work we do and the why, the big why. And I often think about it as not as really being a person who can ask the right questions sometimes and be brave enough to ask the right questions, even if they're the most uncomfortable, difficult, or hard to ask ones. So I think that's my job. I came to it, as I said, I had worked for years in politics as a chief of staff. When I finished that job, I'd worked for a minister in the Victorian government for an entire term. I was very burnt out when I finished. He was retiring, and when the election came, I was always going to finish when he did. I was so tired, but I'd given a lot of thought to what I would do next. And I thought, I want to stop. I'd spent a lot of time trying to make things not be in the newspaper, managing issues, doing issues management, which I'm really good at. And I thought, my next job, I want to take what I know about how change happens, and I want to get things in the newspaper. I want to make news. I want to put things on the agenda that I think are the big issues that we need to face as humanity and as an organisation. So that's when I saw a job come up at Plan, I was drawn to its focus on children and young people. It said that it didn't just work for children and young people, but with them, and co-created solutions. That really attracted me. And it had a focus on gender equality. I'm the eldest of 4 girls. That really resonated with me. They had a campaign called Because I'm a Girl, which were all the barriers to girls just by virtue of being girls. So that kind of was a deep resonance for me about something I wanted to work on. And it was like it was advertised like a chief of staff role to the CEO. And that was brilliant for me because it gave me a chance to kind of come in and work with the CEO across the entire business and kind of learn every aspect of the organisation in this fantastic way. And that's how I kind of got reintroduced into the sector and into the work. And then I kind of developed from there.
So you learnt, how long were you the deputy for?
I've been a plan in total for 10 years.
Okay.
I started off as an executive manager for 1 and I had a year off. I came back as the deputy for 3, I think, and I came back with the specific mission from parental leave to really start the advocacy, community engagement and youth engagement part of our work. That had not been something that Plan had been particularly involved in, quite strong in its programmatic influence, but hadn't really thought a lot about how it would engage in a kind of political way, not in a party political way, but in an advocacy and policy way. And so that became my mission, is to kind of establish that part of our organisation, which was fabulous, including engaging young people to work with us as partners and to help us think through our campaigns and what we wanted to work on together. So we tried to do it in a way that really mirrored our mission and allowed us to have that young people working with us and influencing the work and kind of helping shape the agenda.
Okay, so in talking about young people, obviously, because that's the way Plan is now described in terms of that's your focus, youth engagement and youth as such. How do you, or I guess how does Plan International overall apply that focus around youth to the development work and to advocacy work, and particularly to young women? As you say, gender empowerment was a key driver for you. How do you apply that, or how do you get Plan to, how have you implemented something where Plan applies that?
Yeah, so we kind of have these 4 pillars: learn, lead, decide and thrive. And they kind of are like the pillars of our programmatic and influence work. And so in each of them, we are engaging with young people, children and girls themselves in thinking about and designing our programmatic interventions and our advocacy campaigns. So Learn is all about the right to education and how that takes, and quality education and transformative education, and education that challenges norms and behaviours and that really equips people with the knowledge and skills to be able to transform and contribute in their societies. Lead is clearly the most, this is all about how do you get into the spaces where young people, girls, get to make decisions, take decisions that affect their own lives in a variety of ways. And that's kind of really everything from kids clubs to girls clubs to environments where people get to feminist participatory research, where we, equip. I'm thinking about here this work we did in the Solomon Islands, where we were really looking at the barriers to girls' education. And we equipped this group of girls as researchers in their own context, with cameras and with the tools to be able to go and document the barriers and then work through what might be some of the solutions. Now, those girls, when we first met them, have never been asked what they thought about anything. And by the end, they had written a manifesto that they then took to their own political leaders, arguing for what changes needed to be made. So that process of developing the leadership. Decide is really around bodily autonomy, sexual and reproductive health, all the rights to decide when, if, how you have sex and have children, etc. And Thrive is more cross-cutting, I suppose. I think that captures our work here with food and nutrition, water and sanitation, that sort of thing. And the way we do it is really to engage and involve young people and children as our partners in the work, in thinking through what are the issues, what are the issues in the context, and what might be some of the possible solutions in designing those programs together. You'll often see in Australia that that young people they design the campaigns, they run the campaigns, they front the campaigns. I mean, sometimes, I'm not the spokesperson for Plan. the Youth Activist series are. And that is a deliberate choice to give space and to amplify those voices in places where we can sort of use our influence and power as this relatively large international non-government organisation to bring voices to the table that would otherwise not be heard.
Yeah. So, all right. So in that's what you've implemented and that's what you're really seeing working, excuse me. So what do you see now for you taking this sort of mission, I guess, forward? What, given those outcomes or the outcomes you're seeing emerge, what is the next step, I guess? What is the pathway that you want to be in charge of, how the direction you want to see plan going? Or is it more of this and just building on what you've just described in those 4 pillars?
I think that one of the things we're thinking strategically is about how do we better sort of fuel, like how do we think of ourselves as part of an ecosystem rather than just this big kind of beast in the world, but really if we consider what is our role in a ecosystem, then the question we ask ourselves is what's the right thing for us to be doing as planned, and what are the right things for young people to be doing for themselves, and when do we sort of step forward and when do we step back, and when do we push those voices forward. And I think the key here for us is really thinking about how do we fuel and support youth and girl-led movements themselves. Excuse me, I'm about to be interrupted. So sorry, that's working from home.
I completely understand that. Don't worry. Do it all the time. It's fine.
I think it's like, how do we kind of better fuel those local civil society, those local, very small, often sort of embryonic youth-led initiatives, entrepreneurs, yep, etc. And how do we sort of incubate them, support them, and fuel them, in different ways to be really vital parts of the ecosystem and the driving of change in their own right. And a key part of our strategy going forward is really more of that. So yep, much less, direct service delivery, much more working with locally led partners and really trying to rethink what that dynamic and that partnership looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's really good. All right. All right, we'll leave it there. I'll leave it nice and brief for this one. Like I say, we do it as a turnaround. The editor will turn it around and put it up on the website at some point, which will be great. Hang on, I'll just stop the recording. So thank you for that.
Did you get what you needed? I guess.
I did.